Alright, so this is a conversation that kind of deviates from the normal train of thought, but it is one that I have seen from people time to time over the years. From Raphael, he says, what if Sakura never went to the Matou family? She would still be Ren's sister, and how do you think she would have turned out? And what I often see is the same question, but going even further than that. What if Sakura was the one that was kept as the Tosaka heir, and Ren went to the Matous instead? So we're gonna roll with that one. First of all, I just want to say you guys are twisted for even wanting to know how that would turn out, but I guess that's why it would probably make a good topic. It's really hard to say, man. There's so many variables. It's just one of those things. I see a lot of people saying that it will be exactly how it was for Sakura, but it will be like 100 times worse. And I feel like just given the trajectory of both their characters, it doesn't seem like the past would be the same, even though they would be holding the same positions. For one, we know that Sakura and Ren are specifically designed to be certain types of characters. Ren was always designated to be the one that's ahead of Sakura, Sakura always being the one that kind of falls slightly behind. This is something that's directly in the Zero novel, and given the relationship that Ren had with their father, we don't even know if Sakura would stay true to the Magus path, because as you can see, she doesn't really care for it as a character. Like, there was nothing that was stopping Sakura for pursuing magecraft after everything had went down. But I'm sure, you know, that's a trauma inducing thing to go through when you're trying to satisfy the same thing that this overlord Zoken was trying to get out of her. So just training magecraft on her own accord, it would just bring back horrible memories. And she does get into some training after Stay Night is finished, around the time that Hollow Ataraxia rolls around, so there is something. And if we're being honest, it's not like she could do anything up until that point anyway, because Zoken has been watching her from the inside the whole time. So even if she wanted to go into this personal venture of magecraft, you got Zoken on the sidelines like, what you doing that for? Nobody told you to do that. And then he'll just ruin her body further, making it harder for her. Between the two characters, we know that Ren was supposed to inherit the magic crest because she was the preferred one to carry out the position of being the heir of the family. And it's not because Sakura is some type of disposable goods. I see people get that wrong all the time. People assume that since Ren was the one that was kept instead of Sakura, that Sakura didn't have potential that was good as her, and they couldn't be more wrong. In fact, I would argue that Sakura has more potential than Ren. It just takes her longer to get to it. Just think about it, and think about the way that the story goes down. And we just made the video covering the elemental affinities, right? Ren is an average one, which means she has an affinity for the 5 main elements, which works really good for the Tosaka family because that lets you know right off the bat, okay, we don't gotta worry about her. If we just keep her ahead of the game, keep her on her studies, she's gonna turn out better than majority by default. Sakura, on the other hand, as I mentioned, has the abstract affinity, where while it is in that same realm, you don't know when it's gonna blossom. And that just goes back to what I was saying before about her blooming after Ren. It would take too long for her to blossom, and Tokiomi probably felt like there wouldn't be enough time, maybe something would happen and she wouldn't make it. So with that in mind, Ren would just be the safer option. I mean, think about the counterparts. Think about how Sakura has so many more counterparts than Ren. They're not just doing that because they favor Sakura more. That has nothing to do with it. It's because she has so much potential as a character that we never got to see, which is why she makes for a better vehicle most of the time. We know that Sakura is stronger mentally than Ren. And no, this is not me guessing. This is from the story too. Remember Femme Fatale? The bad ending where Sakura got a hold of Ren and she put her through the same things that she was going through when she was under Zoken? So in Femme Fatale, Sakura put Ren in a domain where she had to go through the same trauma. And she said herself that Ren couldn't last a day. Keep in mind that by by this point in time, Rin is already an adult, and Sakura is saying she couldn't last a day before she broke. She was already crying. Whereas if you look at the Fate Zero novel, Zoken brings up the fact that as a child, Sakura was fighting this off for 3 days, but by the 4th day, she finally broke. But again, she was still young and still leagues ahead in terms of holding it together. So just from that alone, we know that Rin would have veered off course significantly. I don't even think you would be able to control her in the way that Zoken was controlling Sakura, because she's just not mentally fit to go through something like that. Hell, Rin was free. She literally had freedom, and she was already at her limit, just trying to keep up this Magus image and stay true to her family name and her father's desires, and she was about to break from that. Another thing is that since Sakura was abstract in design, I feel like that's why she made for such a good second Grail vessel. Sakura's affinity, the imaginary numbers, that's the reason why the shadow looks the way that it does, because conceptually it's designed after her element. It's hard to say that Rin would even have a shadow because her elements are based around the primary. It's very possible that Zoken's whole plan would have fell through simply because she wouldn't be a good fit to be a Grail vessel. And with no shadow or no vessel, you get a completely different story. We don't lose Archer. Shiro doesn't get his arm, at least in the way that we got it in Heaven's Field. Everything starts to get changed around. Another thing that I saw that was interesting was I saw some people believe that Shiro would have no reason to have relations with Sakura because a lot of their bonding stemmed from Sakura coming over to the Emiya household when she was younger. But if that doesn't happen, then it's much more likely that they may possibly become enemies. If you look at the nature of Sakura's counterparts, because remember, the counterparts are still her to some degree. I think people forget, and they tend to get overly obsessed with the person that's controlling the body. So it's highly likely we would have had a more antagonistic nature, or have gotten somebody from the Sakura 5 even sooner. We would finally get to see her magecraft in action beyond her hollow arm. I've always wanted to see what Sakura was capable of if she wasn't being held back by her position and actually got a chance, not at Ren's expense, but just in general. So ultimately, a bunch of things change. I mean, if you've noticed Sakura's roles as counterparts, they're usually antagonists at some point in time. It's just in her nature. So I feel like she would be the same way. Instead of being like Ren, where she treads the line between trying to be cold-hearted, but also still trying to be the nurturing sister undercover, Sakura would actually be cold-hearted. That's one take. Another take is, let's say she doesn't end up cold-hearted. Her character would still operate in extremes, meaning she could do something crazy, like actually try to go back and save Ren, which may or may not make things worse. It's possible that Ren might not even make it through the training. I mentioned before in Femme Fatale that Sakura put her in the domain of the worms as a simulation, but this doesn't even account for the things outside. This doesn't account for the worms being inside of her body. This doesn't account for the involvement of Shinji. She got it light. Okay, so it's way more to it than it seems. If Sakura still followed the Magus path, I really can't see that considering how Tokiomi ditched her in the original setting. But if she does, she would probably end up as one of the underhanded people at the clock tower that we have to go up against. I really want to have a POV sit down with Sakura and just see how she feels about Tokiomi abandoning her, just to see where her head is at. It's nigh impossible considering her mind is so fractured, but it would have been nice to see her take on it because they never really get into that. It's kind of like the way Shiro is. That part of her past is just erased from her memory because it's not something that's meant to be tampered with. But I just feel like that'll be interesting to see anyway.